So this morning I came across a post online. I was just, browsing and just, doing one of these things on my phone and just going through a bunch of sites or social media stuff. And I came across a post that said, quote unquote, "We've always done it this way." And it really hit me because I've used this terminology or this quote for many years in my corporate world. And I thought about this for a second and I said, how do we look at what that means? How do we figure out what that means? And it can be interpreted in many different ways. And there's another thing that goes along the lines of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I thought about that as well. And the way I look at it is, if we've always done it this way, if we have that mentality, if I incorporate that out of the corporate world and incorporate it into photography and videography, how would we ever develop? How would we ever change? How do we ever take our game to the next level? I want to talk about that before we get into Lightroom. All right, so welcome back. And before we get into Lightroom, like I said, I want to talk about this quote. And for those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. For those of you who are my subscribers, thank you for supporting me. And so let's talk a little bit about this quote. And when I think about it from photography, videography standpoint, as I said earlier, if we keep doing things the way we've always done it, how does that make us better? How do we get into the next level? How do we up the ante, if you will, on videography and photography? If I took my camera and I went out and took shots the same exact way, I don't think I would develop, and I don't think any of you guys would develop. And so I guess one thing that I want to challenge myself on doing is, how do I look at things a different way? We all kind of get comfortable with how we do things and we tend to stick to that, for the most part at least. But if we looked at every situation and said, yeah, I do it this way, but let me kind of think about how I can do this better, would that make us better photographers or videographers or content creators in general? I think so. So I want to challenge myself as well as set it up for you guys to challenge yourself on how you can improve your skills and how can you get out of that comfort zone and be able to develop yourself further by not thinking about, this is how I've always done it or how we've always done it. Just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean that's the best way to do it. And I think having that open mindset about, let's look at this from a different angle, helps us to develop as an individual and a professional. So again, I think I'm going to take that challenge to heart and incorporate it myself, even though I've preached this and I've tried to incorporate it into my corporate world. But I think even again, for the sake of photography and videography, I think it can go a long way. So I'm going to challenge myself to follow that with each project that I do, each time I grab a camera. And I guess one other example that I want to share is, let's just say you go to a tourist site, whether it's, I don't know, a Grand Canyon or the Statue of Liberty or whatever it might be. And, I've said this before in my previous video, is for the most part, you'll get into a position where you've got a view of something and you've got all these tourists that are taking basically the same exact picture. And if you look at that example and said, well, this is how we've always done it, or this is how most people do it, is that going to give you that shot that's going to stand out from the rest of the 50 people that are there taking the picture? Probably the same angle, same everything, different cameras, right? But if you do it differently, maybe you go out to the side somewhere and you try to take a different angle that no one else is taking. Is that going to help you develop as a photographer or videographer or a content creator? I think so. Just because those 50 people are doing it one way and you're doing it the other way, it's going to help you stand out. So your work automatically is going to look different. It's going to attract attention to you as a photographer, as a videographer. So again, let's figure out how we can incorporate this into our world, regardless of what you do, whether you're in photography, videography, or you're in even, for example, the corporate world. Let's figure out how we can do things better, because if you don't, then we're always going to be doing it the same way. All right, so with that being said, today's video is more about just basic tools, basic hacks, tips, whatever you want to call it, for Adobe Lightroom. And I want to get into Lightroom a little bit just because it's such a powerful tool that I think a lot of people don't utilize, which As a photographer, I absolutely love it. Again, extremely powerful. So I'm gonna go over 5 tips that I think are great for beginners. So if you are in the intermediate phase or the advanced phase, again, this might come in handy if you don't know how to use it. Or if you know how to use it, you can always learn maybe new techniques that you haven't used before. So let's go ahead and start with our tips. Let's jump into Adobe Lightroom. First, we're gonna be working with 2 photos. This one I'm gonna use for a couple examples, and I'm gonna use another one for another example. These photos are not the greatest photos by any means, but I'm gonna use them as an example in Lightroom. So tip number 1, what I like to do is once I've got my photo open and I'm in the Develop tab, is simply clicking on the auto function here to adjust the highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, as well as exposures. Now, the reason I use this is just to make sure that, not to make sure, but just to get an idea of what my capabilities are of the photo based on what Lightroom thinks. So once I hit auto, you can certainly still go in and adjust any of the settings that you want to your liking, and adjust the photos as you want. But having that auto feature on there just gives you, again, a baseline of what Lightroom thinks of your photo. You can simply go ahead and click on reset to go back to normal if you like to, but again, just using the auto feature gives you that capability. So that is tip number 1. Moving on to tip number 2. Now this is, I'm gonna go back to auto here for example, and this, when I first got into Lightroom years ago, this I didn't know and someone told me, and was a complete lifesaver. And it's very simple, but it's one of those things that I guess I overlooked and I didn't know how to do. So if you make any changes to any of these settings here, for example, if I'm bringing the shadows down, instead of me moving this lever back to 0 and resetting it this way, just that one lever, I can do it 2 different ways. I can simply just double click on shadow and it'll go back to 0, or I can go ahead and double click there and hit type 0 and hit enter, and it'll go back to 0. Simple as that. You don't have to mess around with that lever trying to get it back to 0 by one, or going up and down and trying to get it 0. Just super annoying. Double click or type it in and you're good to go. Moving on. Tip number 3. I'm gonna use this other photo here for our tip number 3. Again, not the greatest photo, but a great example. This camera, as you can see, I did a great job in holding it straight. No, I'm joking. So we're gonna straighten this photo out. So a couple things you can do. You can go ahead and click on the crop tool or hit R on your keyboard and it'll bring this tool up. And from here, you can do it by adjusting the lever here and basically align the horizon with the line and try to get it to where you want it to be. I'm gonna go ahead and Command Z that and reset it. You can simply hit the auto function here and it'll do a fairly decent job in straightening your photo out. That's the second way you can do it. Third way is my favorite, is clicking on this little ruler tool here and basically drawing a line across the horizon and letting go, and that'll align the photo properly. So again, 3 ways: the ruler, the bar, or hitting the auto feature on here will adjust the photo. So let's just go ahead and leave it there. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit auto and let it do its thing on here for auto exposure. Again, not the greatest photo, but we're using it. Moving on to tip number 4 is looking and seeing what changes you've made to your photo. So once you've gotten your adjustments made and you want to look at it without the distractions that are on the screen, simply hit the backslash, which is right below the delete button, and it'll give you a before. You hit it again and it'll give you after. That way you can take a look at your edits and see how your photo has developed or changed. So again, backslash gives you a before, backslash again gives you a after. If you don't like that, you can also go ahead and click on the Y's in the bottom here, or hit Y on your keyboard, and it'll give you a side-by-side before and after. You hit it again, it'll split it this way. Hit it again, it'll give you a split up and down this way, and then back to the default. So you can hit Y on your keyboard to do that, or again, my personal favorite is hitting the backslash key below your delete button, and it'll give you the before and after this way. So that is tip number 4. Moving on to tip number 5. So now you've got your edits done and you want to take a look at the photo without the distractions and maybe get a full view on it. What you can do is there's a feature in Lightroom called Lights Out, and you simply hit L on your keyboard and it'll black everything out for you or gray everything out for you in your photo. That way you can take a look at it. If you don't want to be distracted by any of the toolbars, even though this is kind of dulled out on the sides, you can hit Shift and Tab, and that'll give you a bigger view without the tools on the sides. And right now it's grayed out, so if you hit L again, it'll give you a full black view on the borders, and you can take a look at the photo without any distractions. Make sure you got it to where you want it to. The levels look good, the photo looks good, you're happy with it, gives you a great view. Now you can go back to your normal. Hit L again, or hit Shift and Tab, and now you got your tools back. So that is tip number 5. Okay, let's go ahead and jump out of Adobe Lightroom. Alright guys, hopefully you found this to be helpful. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, hit that bell notification so you're notified every time I upload a video. I am here every Thursday with a tutorial on Adobe products such as Premiere, Photoshop, or Lightroom. And of course, I'm dropping a video every Tuesday and sometimes during the week as a bonus video. So thank you so much for your love and support. I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you might be, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.